D5531, my old Airfix Class 31, was well used and arrived with me back in the very early 80s with a build date of 1975. However, now, much like her owner, she's starting to feel her age, so it was time for a full service. So first we need to get rid of all the dirt off both bogies, and for that I'm using a solution of IPA and an ultrasonic bath. Down with the lid, good old clean, and away we go. So in this video, unusually we're going to start in reverse. So I've already stripped down the Airfix Class 31, and what we're going to do is look at a couple of points and then reassemble, showing tips and tricks. Now, one of the biggest things for the Airfix Class 31 is that they often sound extremely grindy and sometimes run hot. And there is a very simple reason for this. This is the top of the bogie, motor bogie, and this is the bogie pivot securing screw, which goes in the there we go, there's the chassis. It fits in here and just helps it pivot, but also secures the bogie in place. Now the thread on it is too long, I don't know if you can see that on the camera, and it goes in directly above one of the worms underneath, so that if you screw it in all the way, which you might think would be quite a natural thing to do because you should put a screw in properly, guess what, look at that, I can barely turn the armature. So it's necessary to back it off just about 2 turns really. Then of course it's loose and will work loose with use. So what I'm going to do, just using a little file, is shorten that so that it can no longer foul the worm. That's going to be incredibly boring, so I'm not going to show you that in action. So here we are back. In fact, I didn't use a file, I just used a bit of wet and dry and spun it around a few times and took it back. Didn't need a lot, but now if we try it back in its socket, and we're even doing it up with a screwdriver this time. Do it up firmly. It has no effect at all on that, it runs smoothly if you like. That is one of the most common reasons for the old Airfix Class 31 to make that awful grinding noise. And such a simple fix once you know what it is. So one of the best ways to test it is to get the motor running and then gradually turn the screw in, to see if you can hear any change. And I don't think we can now. Now we're done with that, let's look at what else needed to be done. It's got a 5-pole really chunky armature, as you can see, and a good strong magnet. It doesn't need recharging. Seems to be the old trying ones that go down. Good standard Airfix brushes there. So obviously we need to clean between the commutator segments and clean the commutator. Now these bearings on each end of the shaft, many years ago a very young Mike, who used to service all his locos back then even, decided it would be a great idea to use epoxy resin and glue the bearings in place so that the armature didn't pop out every time you opened it to service it. Now that's good, but what it does mean is you can't look behind to see how far that little screw has emerged, but we've dealt with that. We just keep going back till it doesn't affect on it. Now it will also need a really good clean out inside. Mine did. There's loads of old dry lubrication in there, and a really good lube needs to be applied, something like Lavelle 102 or even Hobby Lube gear lube. Now the wheels, getting oil on everything, are plastic wheels with traction tyres. They've gone a bit hard, but there's still a good bit of traction, and a nylon gear. An area you need to pay particular attention to is this bearing here. If there's any wear in there, you'll eventually get these rocking, and she won't run very nicely, even though it won't matter about pickups like on the old trying motor bogie. So it's pretty standard stuff really, plenty of good quality lubrication where it's needed, and then we can start reassembling. There's the old bogie frame. Now they are getting brittle with age. Now this is Airfix 1977 vintage, and this is a heck of a well used locomotive. You can see that the middle wheels of the A1A as Class 31s were are just moulded very much like the old Triang. So I'm now going to gradually put things back together, and we'll watch the whole process in reverse, making it a little bit different. So we've got the motor bogie reassembled. As I say, do watch out because the plastic frame is becoming brittle now, and it's liable to snap, particularly where the clips go in. You put the end in with the two clips either side first, and then drop down onto the back one there. Taking a look at the trailing bogie, as you can see the arrangements for the pickups here, it picks up off all 6 wheels. Quite a nice bit of copper work going on there. You've got your suppression capacitor there, which you must have unless you're doing DCC things. But one thing it'd be worth taking a look at is to make sure that you only have enough pressure on these to make sure they stay in contact with the backs of the wheels, and not too much, because when I initially tried mine it wouldn't run freely at all. I must have been putting on quite a drag onto the loco. So now we come to look at the chassis, which is quite a simple affair. As you can see, this is the trailing end, this is the motor bogie end. Now something I've noticed is that there must have been some sort of shim there, because I've stuck something here, a bit of plastic, which engages on the top of here, the motor bogie, and helps keep it in place. That's obviously come away, so I'm going to have to fashion something better. And in order to have a look and see exactly what it used to look like, it's quite fortunate that some years ago I bought another one. Apart from being in a very dusty box, she's hardly ever been used. So we can open her up and compare what should be in there. So here is the pristine one. Oh, there's a few differences, isn't there? We got this under these springs here, which is a little bit of card, and you can see the little pieces that have gone. 2 little plastic tags, one there and one there. Oh, this magnet's a bit stronger. So that's what I need to fashion to go over the top. I wonder if that screw, well, let's look at that screw, shall we, and see the size of him thread wise, because I bet surely it's something Airfix must have noticed the problem. It's shorter, but it still looks quite long. It was loose, it was finger tight. I wonder if it's an issue that was never picked up. Anyway, I'm going to put this all back. We've seen what's inside, and we use that as a reference for repairing the old one. One thing I just noticed, I said 1977, in reality 1975. Blimey, Airfix were way ahead of their time. You can see up the top there, look, the camera's picking it up. Airfix Products Limited 1975, made in Hong Kong. So far ahead of their time. I was amazed to find the original peg that had gone missing rattling around inside the body here. So it has been a much simpler job. It's now super glued back on. This looks like I used a bit of old cocktail stick. We'll have to check and make sure it's actually an even height limiter, but that hopefully will be a good easy repair. The chassis is back together. Simpler than I thought. Now the next problem that this poor old loco has, D5531, is that the loco body screws have stripped their thread. So I can see what I've done in the past is stuck double-sided tape on. Ugh, dear oh dear, sometimes you regret the things you do. And also look at my very subtle bit of ballasting here, a lump of lead. We'll decide whether or not that stays. Look at that, this whole thing has run for miles. Miles and miles and miles. We've got that virtually brand new one up there, but we won't give up on the old girl. This one was running round in the very early 80s, maybe my third diesel loco. And the Class 31 was a prized thing indeed, because they were one of my favourite locos. Cromptons came first, of course. But I used to go and watch these on the Portsmouth to Bristol services, and also my good friend Peter and I used to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go over to the railway crossing in Havant to watch the early morning paper trains. That would be a train that came down from London, sometimes Class 50 hauled, and then 2 Class 31s would arrive from Fratton, and they would come up and shunt over. One would head off towards Bognor with a paper train, the other one would go off towards Fareham, perhaps Bristol, and the Class 50 would go on down to Portsmouth. So a freeway split early in the morning. Yeah, wouldn't do that by choice nowadays, I suppose. But yes, Class 31's lovely old things. Just look at the details for a minute. Alright, it's moulded, but those handrails are incredibly fine. Needs a bit of a clean up, doesn't she? But let's next look at what to do with these. Now, just looking at this, these are beginning to split when you drive the screws in, where they've stripped out. And if I want to put anything into the thread to tighten up the screw, it's going to split it more. So I've got this piece of brass pipe, which seems to be a relatively snug fit. So I will cut some little ferrules here and drive them down onto that and glue them in place. So it should stop the pillars from splitting anymore. I'll come back. And now we have the 2 collars fitted around the pillars. And I think the simplest thing to do will be to feed something thin down inside the pillars that the screws will hopefully then bite against. I've got to let the super glue go off that I've put on. It goes right the way around to stabilise them. Now, I don't know if anybody knows a product called Helicoil, but this is what's inspired me with this. Got some thin copper wire from some zip wire, 2 strands twisted together, carefully wound around the bottom half of the screw that goes into the pillar, and tightly wound. This will now be screwed into the mount. Let's see if I can do it on camera. A bit like an elephant wearing boxing gloves trying to wipe its bottom with a piece of confetti, but we'll have a go. Screw it in till the screw's quite tight. And then gently withdraw the screw. And as you see, the copper wire has taken up the thread inside. And that'll be enough to get bite. And so D5531 rides the rails again. One of the things that I had to do to stop all the grinding was slightly open out the pole pieces on the motor. They were too close to the armature, and the armature was just striking it, making the vibration that you could hear. And so the pole pieces were removed, put in a vise, and they're ever so tough, but ever so slightly flexed. And I'll also recharge the magnet. You've seen me do that many times before with XO4 type. Now she's done, it will be time to turn my attention to her rather fresh and new looking version in the box, and get that one up to scratch as well, and hopefully renumber it somewhen.